to show you, there was a very good study done by the Growth Commission, which was put together by Trevor Manuel under a professor from the London School of Economics, Professor Spence. And what they did is very interesting. They said, okay, we're going to take a study of 13 countries that have grown by more than 7% per annum and for a period of 25 years or longer. So they take 13 countries grown by more than 7% for 25 years or longer. Because if you can do that, you're doing something right, aren't you? So that was their theory. So let's see, what do they have in common? And they found that they have a tremendous amount in common. And this is what they had in common. A, they had good leadership and effective government. I'm not even going to comment on that. You can make up your own mind. Capable and committable, credible, stable, honest. Strong leadership. Okay? Good market, regulatory institutions. Well, South Africa still has some good market and regulatory institutions. The Competition Commission at times can be good. The idea isn't bad. And the idea actually, given a little bit more support and a little bit more teeth, can actually produce a more efficient market. The Reserve Bank, good. The bank regulated, despite able, good. Our banking system, still good, rated third in the world for the soundest banking system. So we still have some good institutions, effective delivery mechanisms, investment in infrastructure, education and health. You be the judge of that. If you look at the World Economic Forum, we are rated number 148 out of 148 countries in terms of education. Okay, so healthcare, we're a little bit higher up, but not by much. Infrastructure, we're a lot higher up. But a point is often made. I was listening to a speaker from the World Bank the other day, and he uses a very good analogy. He basically says, if you take a snapshot of South Africa, we still stand up miles above the rest of Africa. You know, we still look pretty, we've got road infrastructure, we've got rail infrastructure, we've got ports, we've got decent shopping centers, we've got all the big brands here, we've got nice banks, we've got ATMs, we've got the internet. We look very progressive. But it's not for an investor, the snapshot, that matters so much. It's the movie. And when you look at the movie, that is where the problem with South Africa comes. And it is the last 4 years. We were doing perfectly fine prior to the last 4 years. All right. Okay. So something to bear in mind. Whereas with the rest of Africa, if you take the snapshot, it doesn't look so great. But if you look at the movie, some countries are honestly getting their act together. The Ghanas, the Kenyas, the Nigerias of the world. And the movie is a very different tale. Under very difficult circumstances and very little support, those countries are starting to get their act together. Most must protect people, not industries, firms, or jobs. Must afford equality of opportunity. Must try to limit inequality where possible. Intervention can help, but must be temporary. That's another important thing. All of these countries may have intervened in the face of inequality when these governments made the initial transition. But it's very important to bear in mind, they gave that intervention a timetable to work. We don't have that. Like BEE, you can say, okay, South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. True. We have the highest levels of inequality in the world. Okay. But we've been running Black Economic Empowerment and BEE codes for, since 1996. All right. And every year, we never meet the requirements. We're never doing anything right. They extended another 10 years and another 10 years, and there's never an end. So in the first place, you make people reluctant to actually do their very best because you don't give them a frame to deliver in. And when they do deliver, you always nullify it. I look at Nedbank when I started working back in 1994. I look at its board, I look at its staff, I look at it today. Don't tell me nothing's changed. It is absurd to even make that statement, yet that is the way private sector is treated. All right, so that is a problem. In agriculture, there have been hugely creative initiatives to distribute land that have produced successful Black emerging commercial farmers, especially in the grain industry. But it is just considered worthless. But it's a model that's worked. So what you really should be saying, well, if that works, let's see if we can do it this way and extend it to the entire economy and different subsectors within agriculture. So it's really about intervention must have a time limit. Then you can rally people behind it. Fully exploited the world economy. They were open. They had low import cost. They had internal competition. They had import knowledge, easier to learn than to invent, exploit global demand, and they had economies of scale. This is the biggest problem for our exporters. The biggest problem. This is an issue, especially infrastructure and especially power infrastructure, which is insufficient. But the biggest reason our exporters are not growing lie here, and especially there, input cost. Maintain macroeconomic stability. We did very well on this until 5 years ago. We're still doing well in terms of monetary policy, but we are not doing so well in terms of public finances. Okay, we've deteriorated. We'll speak about that. High rates of saving and investment. It's about creating a vision of the future. South Africans don't save, many because they simply don't earn enough to save. So that's a different story. But those that do earn enough to save have no vision of the future. And especially in this country. Market allocation, a functioning market system. Prices that guide resources. Resources follow prices. But if you intervene in the setting of prices, like they want to do now through this Minerals and Petroleum Resources Act, it's going to cause distortions and what gets developed and what doesn't get developed. Property rights, well, we've spoken about that at length. Liberalize product and labor markets. Liberalize your labor markets. We have an extremely unionized labor market. These countries all had liberalized labor markets. That's why they grew by over 7% for a period of 25 years and longer. So you be the judge of this. The other problem, of course, is government's expansionary stance since 2009. That's really where things started to go wrong. We can't keep doing that. We've been running deficits of over 3% of GDP, so our government debt has now climbed up to almost 50% of GDP. Okay, now that's not the worst numbers out there. Greece is 175% of GDP. Okay, Japan is 253% of GDP. So there are many countries, even the great Germans, now stand at 80% of GDP, government debt to GDP. Now, of course, the Germans you can excuse because they pay Greece's interest on its debt. Okay, so maybe you can forgive them for being at that level. But nonetheless, that just puts it in perspective. America stands at 100%. So it's not the worst, but it's the direction. And it's what we are spending money on. Okay? Why do we have high levels of government debt? We have high levels of government debt not because we are finishing power stations. We're spending on our power stations, but we're never finishing them. We're in year 7 of Medupi. Okay? The international norm for a 6-unit coal-fired power station is to build 5 years on it. We're in year 7. We think that we'll have unit 1 done by the end of this year, early part of next year. Remember, there's 6 units. Most people build 6 units in 5 years. We will build 1 unit in 7 years. Maybe, maybe not. We're not sure. That's what Eskom said, but they said something else the last time. So we're not sure. All right, so we win the prize for unique incompetence there, nonetheless. Okay, some gold medals that we do take. But we're not spending it on that. We're spending it really on expanding the civil service. That's what we're spending it on. So we are borrowing money to make the civil service bigger. Government's been doing 2 things. They've been employing more civil servants, and they've been paying them a very decent above-inflation wage increase. And they've been borrowing money to do that. And this is what the rating agencies have got their biggest problem with. If we were spending it on public infrastructure, on schools, on hospitals, on all of that that raises the standard of living, on roads, on ports, on railways, on power stations, and you were running a deficit of over 3% of GDP, it probably wouldn't be such a bad thing at all. Because you are increasing your ability to grow faster in the future, employ more people, create more taxpayers. We're not doing that. Look at the gap between capital expenditure by the public sector and the wage bill. This is just government's wage bill. Look at the gap. So you can see where the priority is. You can absolutely see where the priority is. So public finances have deteriorated, public policy have deteriorated. That raises the risk in this country. But public policy and public finances have a direct impact on the world we live in. Okay, it just does. The fact that we never build a power station is one of the reasons we can't grow by more than 3% per annum. And that brings us to infrastructure. We need to spend faster on infrastructure, and we need to spend more efficiently on infrastructure. You take Medupi. Medupi is essentially, what is it? It is 6 times the original budget. And it's not done yet. And they haven't added an ounce of additional kilowatt hours to the grid. whatsoever. Okay? The Reserve Bank figures, based on its figures, they say with the current power capacity, we can only grow by 3.5%. Okay? We say it's less than that. We say it's 3% probably in all likelihood. So if we want to grow faster, we have to deal with this. So this has been a serious problem. And perhaps we need to relook it. Perhaps it's not just about it's not just about Eskom and putting pressure on Eskom and making sure that it functions better. Perhaps there shouldn't be something like just an Eskom. Perhaps you should open that market up completely, liberalize it, allow private players to come in. That is the best form of competition. It is just always the best form of forcing accountability. So that is part of the problem, okay? So at the moment, if you look at it, what have I got here? So your cumulative loss in GDP by now would have been 10% of GDP since 2008, okay? So our growth would have been 10% higher did we not have the electricity constraint.